At the end of last year's NBA season, we saw Achilles ruptures happening just fast and furious. Dame, Tatum, and then Tyrese Halliburton. But now at the beginning of this year's NBA season, all we're seeing is calf strains. Anthony Davis, then Wemby, and now all of a sudden Giannis. So why at the end of last year are we seeing the ruptures happening in the Achilles portion of this structure, but now at the beginning of this year, we're seeing them up here in the bulky calf muscle portion of this structure? There is an explanation for it. Let's get into it. Like I just said, the Achilles and the calf, it's all part of the same structure. So the calf muscles, there's actually two different muscles. One is the gastrocnemius, it's these two bulky muscles on the very outside. That's kind of what you see, right? When you think of someone's calf muscle, like protruding from their skin, you're seeing these two heads of the gastrocnemius muscle. Then underneath of it is the soleus muscle, right? And then what these two muscles do is they wind into each other like a mop wringing out, and then that makes an aponeurosis. That's where the two muscles come together, and that forms the actual tendon. That's the Achilles tendon. Now the Achilles tendon is not straight up and down tendon fibers. They're twisting fibers of both of these two muscles. Now the other thing you'll see here is in the calf, the gastrocnemius muscle crosses both the knee joint as well as the ankle joint. And that's what puts this muscle at such high risk for strain, because these two major joints that are responsible for jumping, for stopping, for pushing off everything are straining this muscle in two different places. Now, the soleus muscle, the other muscle that makes up the Achilles tendon, the other part of that calf Achilles complex, that does not cross the knee joint. It starts below the knee joint. So a lot of times when you are straining the calf muscle, you're actually straining the gastroc. Now, in the amateur ranks of players, I would say calf strains are, pulled calf muscles, people call it. It's one of the number one things you see, just kind of those nagging injuries. They're just so common because of the eccentric loading this tendon goes through, right? Every time you straighten your knee, you dorsiflex, push up your foot, it's just putting this structure at so much risk. Now, the other reason you see this kind of happening a lot is because the calf complex, as well as this muscle complex right here, the peroneals, which go on the outside of your ankle, these are the main stabilizers of your foot, just in terms of keeping the foot stable on the ground, no matter what you're doing, right? If you're pivoting side to side, going up for a tennis serve, you're shooting a jump shot, coming down off the ground and you land on someone's foot, the two main muscle groups, I should say, that stabilize you, superficial posterior group, which is the calf complex, and then the peroneals, which is those muscles on the outside of your foot, or outside of your leg and foot and ankle. Now the peroneals, a lot of times people just, it's a specific muscle group, and a lot of times you don't see people putting a lot of effort into specifically training those peroneals. And so with a weak peroneal complex, your calf has to take up more of that. Now you see a lot of people doing calf exercises, right, all the time. But if you have a weak peroneal group, it leaves the calf at so much more risk. And so if you have players that are just focusing on larger muscle groups and not paying attention to some of the other muscle groups in the leg, you could see no matter how much you strengthen the calf, if you don't have that other really, really important stabilizer strengthened and limber, you're gonna get repeated calf strains. Now, the other reason why you see these so much, at least in my opinion right now in the NBA, and in the Los Angeles Lakers were the clue to this. Remember this year when they wouldn't play on their in-season tournament court because it was so bad? How many times have you seen players slipping and sliding on that court? Remember, main stabilizer of the leg is the calf and the peroneals. Now, what happened with Tyrese Halliburton last year? For his Achilles rupture, you saw him slip out on that court, and that's where he got the calf strain. Because his calf, as he was eccentrically loading, as that foot was dorsiflexing like crazy, that knee was straight, right? And that calf had so much tension on it, he was trying to push off. Now what was happening? The calf was trying to fire, stabilize his foot on that ground as he was sliding backwards on the court, then it's strained. You get court surfaces like the in-season tournament courts where they just have a different grip profile, right? It doesn't matter the shoe, right? It's just different. And so you see people sliding around on those courts, you're just not getting as much traction. We've seen it for a couple years now, where people are just not doing well on those courts as they do on regular NBA level courts. And so that calf muscle is having to fire hard and fast. And if your peroneals, right, aren't picking up the slack, or even if they are, and the court is just different enough and you are really getting to the extremes of range of motion in your knee and ankle, what's gonna happen, right? It's gonna be so much more prone to straining. Now remember also, a lot of these players were playing Eurobasket, so the off season was kind of short. And for other people that may just have not have, maybe they were on injured reserve or just trying to nurse injuries in the off season and they come back during the regular season, that calf muscle, it doesn't have the compliance that it does kind of midway through the season. So you make one quick movement and that calf can strain. That's a very common reason. I mean, it's a reason why the calf muscle is so commonly strained. Honestly, I'm surprised we don't see it more and more, to be honest. Now, the other thing that could be going on right now is lower drop shoes. Remember, lower drop shoes, which we see a lot of in the NBA right now. If you look at a lot of my reviews or my sheet or the app that's coming up pretty soon, it's gonna be free. You see a lot of shoes in the NBA are getting under 0.8 centimeters of drop, right? So typically in the NBA, or typically just in basketball and tennis shoes, that drop was anywhere from 0.8 centimeters to 1 centimeter, 1.2 centimeters, typical drop. Now you're starting to see them get into 0.7, 0.6, 0.5 centimeters. Now remember, that's gonna put even more strain on the Achilles, more strain on the calf. Yeah, you can get lower to the ground, more freedom of movement, things like that. That's all well and good. You're unlocking things, that's fantastic. But it's also a big reason why you could see calf strain. And how many times do I talk about shoes that have really soft foam in them that I talk about what you can get a quote unquote negative heel. A negative heel is when the heel starts sinking lower than the forefoot. Cushlon foam, super soft foam, like in Wemby's case, in the GT Hustle 3, it just talked about how, in that video where I talk about how he is not busting his ankle all the time, it's because he's making up for it, right? But if you're sinking into that shoe, right, even if you have an orthotic in there, you better have a pretty stiff orthotic, but the orthotic will toggle back there just as much as your foot will. If you're sinking into the foam of those shoes, you could create a negative heel for yourself, same as Anthony Davis in something like the Kobe 4. I mean, that shoe is going to be a little bit more compliant, but who knows what kind of foam his PEs have in them. But shoes like that, where the foam is really, really soft, you can sink back into there, rock back, and now you're putting even more strain on that tendon. So now you've got a court surface that's not compliant, right, or that's allowing more slipping and sliding. You got shoes with super soft foam. You got people really focusing on the big muscle groups and maybe not the smaller muscle groups. It's just a recipe for a ton of calf strains. Now, the good thing about a calf strain is it's a lot easier to heal than an Achilles rupture. It's just when you start getting down lower and lower and lower, right, you get into this kind of like no man's land down here where, up here in the calf, great blood flow, very, very easy to heal. Your body heals these up really well. As you get lower and lower and lower, that's where things get harder and harder and harder. Now, a lot of times in surgery, we'll actually cut this, what we call the aponeurosis, this white thing here that kind of makes up the Achilles tendon. That's where the two muscle groups come together. We'll cut that in surgery for people because their calves are so tight. And when you do that, that's all well and good, and you'll be able to push off and you'll be able to play, but you usually lose a little bit of strength permanently in there because the tendon just is, the complex just isn't as tight. It's not wired as tight. And so that's another thing you gotta watch out for is the lower and lower and lower you get, right, the more chance that you're gonna permanently lose some strength. Now, with techniques we have nowadays and with the surgery we have nowadays, obviously those risks are coming down, but this no man's land here a lot of times is a sneaky area where some people call them a calf strain, some people call these Achilles ruptures, partial Achilles ruptures. This no man's land I've started to see is kind of like is the hardest place to heal, and that's because people think they can heal these really easily, and they do heal very easily. It's just that you start losing the strength, whereas when you go into the Achilles, the surgeon come up there, tighten it up, you rehab it, you're back to strength. Up here, they just heal up so easily. So a lot of things to think about. If you want to see what I'm talking about with how Victor Wembanyama is somehow able to wear the GT Hustle 3 and not roll his ankle every single night, make sure you click into this video right here. And if you do want to see my take on why you shouldn't always be playing in shoes that the pros play in, even if they are playing one-to-one with the one you're getting, make sure you click into this video right here. See you in the next video.